Scientific frauds. I took a look here at the word scientific. Science. We here in the Western world are enthralled by science. Science is the successor to religion. It has permeated our society. We reject religion, but we have replaced it with science. And science means knowledge. Go look it up. I did. It's in Webster's dictionary. So the first and primary definition is knowledge. It's something that we know, as opposed to something that we think or feel real good about. And then fraud. Go look that word up. Fraud is a lie. So if you had a scientific lie, scientific fraud, you'd have a knowledgeable deception. Somebody would be deceiving you under the guise of science, and you would believe it because it's knowledge. After all, that's what we want, isn't it? Knowledge. We want more knowledge. And so this is knowledge that is in reality a lie. Now this lie, this fraud, comes in two forms. We have what we know as an actual fraud, and then there's a constructive fraud. Fraud, that's a legal term, by the way. So you look that up in a legal dictionary. We have two dictionaries. We have a legal dictionary, then we have the standard dictionary. Science is not a legal word, but fraud is. So we looked it up here in Bovier's Law Dictionary. So you have an actual fraud. Now what that means is that I'm going to lie to you, and I know I'm lying to you. I have an agenda, and I'm telling you this lie because I want to deceive you. I'm doing it on purpose. I know what I'm doing, and I know how to do it, and I'm doing it to you. That's called an actual fraud. Now a constructive fraud is where I'm going to lie to you. It's just as bad as the actual lie. In fact, it could be exactly the same lie. But the distinction between an actual and constructive fraud is that a constructive fraud is a lie that the teller actually believes himself. So if I lied to you and I said George Washington threw a silver dollar across the Potomac River after he chopped his daddy's cherry tree down with his hatchet, you'd say, well, George Washington did not cut his daddy's cherry tree down with his hatchet, and he did not throw a silver dollar across the Potomac River. You'd say, well, that's a lie. Yeah, but I believe it. See, I believe it. So it isn't a real black lie. It's kind of a little white lie because I'm telling you something that I believe. It's just as false. It didn't happen. It's just as phony. But the distinction is that if you actually believe the lie that you're telling somebody, then it's called a constructive fraud. All right, so now with that in mind, when we go into court and we're talking about perjury, the guy lied, but he believed the lie that he was telling. We discovered that it was false, but it's not perjury because it's a constructive fraud, not an actual fraud. See how simple that is? All right. Now, scientists don't do that, do they? I mean, you wouldn't find a scientific man wearing a white smock working in his laboratory deliberately deceiving you over, say, global warming or something like that. He wouldn't do that, would he? If a scientist were to lie, it would be because he made an honest, sincere mistake, and he's just sorry as hell, and he won't do that again. And thank you very much for correcting me. That's the way we see scientists. Those are the people that have knowledge. So if you are looking for knowledge, that's science, and if you have the knowledge, well, then you're a scientist. See, I've got this knowledge, and so I'm one of the ists, I-S-T-S. Now, evolution must be true, says the naive one, because natural museums are full of ape men, which are proof that men evolved from lower forms of life. Well, those museum models are reconstructions from very few bones, and ape men have been the hope of evolutionists for more than 160 years now. But they always turn out to be either an ape or a man, not halfway between. So far, all of the ape men are either men or apes. Not one missing link has ever been found anywhere at any time by anyone for any cause or reason. Well, not yet. We have high hopes, though. And we're out there looking and spending money. This is where your tax dollars go. We're out looking for the missing link. And we're paying a lot of money to find this missing link, and we've been doing this for a long time. We tolerate this because we want to find the missing link. It's a part of our education. It's a part of our culture. Now, we haven't found one yet, but by God, we're going to. And if it costs us $50 billion to find them, that's what we're going to pay. And that's what we're going to do. Now, in fact, you could take all of these alleged links that have been found so far and place all of their bones in a single coffin. If ancient ape men roamed the earth, grunting at each other and dragging their women by the hair into dirty caves, then where are all of their remains? Lord Sully Zuckerman, the famous British anthropologist, and some guy that's not a creationist, by the way. Now, this guy's an evolutionist. He said that there are no fossil traces of a transformation from an ape-like creature to man, with a footnote number 1 here. There are none because it didn't happen, and all the wishing by evolutionists won't make it true either. Now, some evolutionists act as uncomfortable as a dog in hot ashes when we talk about man coming from monkeys or from apes. And some of these evolutionists allege that Darwin did not teach that. Well, when they say Darwin didn't teach that, they're wrong and they're dishonest, because Darwin wrote, quote, "The Simidae then branched off into 2 great stems, the Old World and the New World monkeys, and from the latter at a remote period. Man, the wonder and the glory of the universe, proceeded." Well, that should settle whether Darwin taught monkey to man evolution. All right, we are reviewing a book. The book is called Evolution, Fact, Fraud, or Faith. It's paperback. It's written by a fellow named Don Boys, spelled B-O-Y-S, Ph.D., piled higher and deeper. This guy is adequate. In fact, he's a little bit better than adequate. And he's got some good lines in here. Really good lines. And the thing that caught my eyeballs on this one was chapter 18 on scientific frauds. And I got to thinking, well, how many of these scientific frauds are there? And the answer is 8. 8 scientific frauds. Life from outer space, Archaeopteryx, Java man, Neanderthal, Piltdown, Nebraska, Peking, and East Africa man are all fakes. They're all frauds. And I liked his book. I liked his chapter 18 because it answers that question. Not very many books ever get down to, well, how many times have we been lied to? Well, the answer is 8. 8. Now, that's not on all of the subjects of anthropology and paleontology and so on. It's just as it relates to East Africa man, Peking man, Nebraska man, Piltdown man, Neanderthal man, Java man, Archaeopteryx, and life from outer space. All as phony as $3 Federal Reserve notes. And here's the part I really liked about it, was that it isn't uncovered by the Reverend Pat Robertson, or, you know, by Billy Graham or somebody. I mean, it isn't the other side. The guys that have uncovered these frauds are the evolutionists. They are the paleoanthropologists. You know, the guys that perpetrate the fraud, and then their buddies find out, hey, wait a minute, Bob lied to us about this. He's trying to make a big name for himself. And then here's the kicker. They never correct the textbooks. I never saw a textbook after Piltdown Man in 1948 was exposed as a fraud. I have never seen a textbook anywhere that said, hey, it's a fraud. Now, in the scientific literature, it's exposed, but none of us ever read scientific literature. When was the last time you read the Anthropaleontologist's Review? Huh? Come on. Hell, you couldn't even spell that. And neither could I. And so we don't read these trade publications, which are just for the elite of the elites, you know, who know that they're lying through their teeth. When we go to school and college, they teach us, you know, with great solemnity, you know, about Piltdown man. And then when it's proven to be a fraud, they just silently remove it for the next generation textbooks. And then they tell us about Java man. And then when we find out that that one's a lie, then they just silently remove him and replace him with Neanderthal man. See? All right, so with that out of the way, then, let's take a look at the story from Life from Space. Creationists believe that man is a direct creation of a personal God, which occurred just a few thousand years ago. I'm not sure that these creationists know how long ago, 6,000, 60,000, but it's not millions, it's just thousands. We maintain that the few bones found of pre-men were either apes or men, or some other specific creature. There's absolutely no doubt that the sketches and models of ape men are frauds, or, at best, the results of an overactive imagination, or maybe they were smoking funny cigarettes. But how can honest scientists tell us that a particular man was really a forerunner of man without evidence? Well, it's called wishful thinking. Remember that unbelieving scientists must never admit the possibility of God, so when they find a few bones, they give them a Greek name. That makes it much more impressive if we call them by a Greek name. Then they call a news conference and boast about finding further proof of man's evolutionary past. Been doing that now for 160 years or more. They call a news conference and they say, look at these bones. This is further proof of man's evolutionary past. We have not produced one shred of evidence that man has evolved at all. Not a shred. We claim we have. We talk about it a lot. We publish it in our papers and news magazines and so on. But when you actually sit down and say, okay, let's document the specific proofs, the evidence. List it. Write it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are they? Well, let's take a look at Java man, Neanderthal man, Piltdown man, Nebraska man, Peking man, and East Africa man. And let's take a look at these. These are all scientific frauds. Over the years, over the past 160 years, and I can remember going to school and hearing about Neanderthal man, Piltdown man. Now, Piltdown man was shown to be a fraud in 1948. Now, I can remember Piltdown man, and I remember that it was shown to be a fraud back when I was a kid. They didn't slow anybody down. They never said, hey, wait a minute, maybe we ought to be thinking more about the people presenting this evidence. I never saw that happen. They just sweep that under the rug and nobody ever mentions it again. But I wanted to mention it again because, you know, over the years, many people have been deceived. See, they found Piltdown man right around World War I. I forgot exactly the year. We'll take a look at it here in a minute. But about World War I, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is the guy that did it. Remember the guy that created Sherlock Holmes? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Well, he was friends with this anthropologist, and so Doyle went out and dummied up a bunch of bones and stuck them in some dirt. See? Then he goes over to this anthropologist and he says, hey, look, I found this bone over here. Let me show you some more of it. See? Takes this guy out and he shows him these bones here in the sand. And the anthropologist gets real excited. And Doyle planted the thought in his mind. He said, maybe this is the missing link. Maybe this is the connection between man and apes. It's called the power of suggestion. And Doyle, now remember, is very knowledgeable in law, very knowledgeable in testimony and evidence. And so the anthropologist starts digging. He digs, and the more he digs, the more he finds, because Doyle keeps going out there and throwing more bones on the ground. See? And he keeps feeding this guy. Pretty soon they've got Piltdown man. See? Well, Doyle never did fess up to it. Doyle always kept a secret. But other anthropologists, you know, when they got to looking at the evidence, you know, as the years went by, they said, hey, wait a minute, old Bob over here has got his head up his hind end, and he's got these bones over here, and he's got Piltdown man, but these bones don't match, and they're all phonied. And so we'll take a look at that story as we progress along, but I thought I'd throw that one out there. That's called Piltdown. Well, remember that Archaeopteryx? That was the connecting link between dinosaurs and birds. That's also a phony. That's a fraud. Hey, listen, it's not creationists now that are discovering Piltdown men and Archaeopteryx as being frauds. It's the archaeologists themselves. Yeah, it's the guys in the club that discovered this. And I've mentioned this before. If you take a look at the cancer cures, of which there's 14 cancer cures, most of the cancer cures were discovered by medical doctors. And yet medical science says there's no cure to cancer and we don't know what to do about it. Well, I've explained that to you in the past. You must wake up and smell the coffee. There's no money in that. The money is in treating cancer, not curing it. Cancer is a $500 billion a year industry. Listen, archaeology is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. And as long as we're looking for the missing link, we've got a meal ticket. As soon as we find the missing link, we're all unemployed. That's what happened with the March of Dimes. As long as we're looking for a cure to polio, we've all got a meal ticket. And the minute we find the polio cure, we're all unemployed. Now, science and scientists, you know, are not dumb people. You don't get to be a scientist by being stupid. And these people all know that their meal tickets are all punched and underwritten by the taxpayers, and it's you and me, the taxpayers over here, that fund all of this scientific research. And as soon as we find the answer to the riddle, then there's no reason to be looking for the answer to the riddle anymore, is there?